Greetings, Otaku Faithful. Thank you for joining me again this week. Once again, it's Larry Williams, OAW Commander-in-Chief, and I'm here to bring you the first in my new weekly movie review segment right here on Otaku Assemble! Weekly, as always, here to bring you the latest review for this week's movie. And this week, despite the fact that I am a week late on this movie's release, I've decided that this week I'm going to go ahead and take a look at X-Men First Class. Now, this is one movie that a lot of you in the past have, requested that I review this film, and I'll be honest with you, I was very skeptical about this film. Since actually, I'm skeptical about any superhero film that 20th Century Fox puts out at this point. So with that said, because I need to get this across before I actually get into the review, I need to get this across because I have a very bad history with 20th Century Fox and their Marvel superhero franchises. First X-Men, love it. X2, one of the best comic book films adaptations ever made, period. Okay? X3, The Last Stand, garbage. X-Men Origins Wolverine, you can go fuck yourself. So, with that said, 2 for 4. 2 for 4. 2 good, 2 horrible. So, this one I was very skeptical about, especially considering this. And I want you all to understand where I'm coming from with this, okay? I'm a big X-Men fan, okay? Big X-Men fan. Despite the fact that I don't even read the X-Men comics anymore. I did in my youth. In my youth, I did read the X-Men comics back in the 90s and in the early 2000s. And of course, avid fan of X-Men the Animated Series, X-Men Evolution, Wolverine and the X-Men. Love them all. Love them all. Hell, even some of the video games I got down on. So yeah, big X-Men fan. Hell, Wolverine is my second favorite superhero of all time. So I did not like what 20th Century Fox was doing with this film franchise. So now let's get into the review. Let's get into this. Now, one thing I believe it is essential to understand about this film, you have to go into this film as if it is a reboot. I think that's the best way. The best way to go into this film is with a reboot, as if it's a reboot. Do not go into this film as if it's a prequel. Do not go into this film thinking it's a prequel to the previously established X-Men film franchise. Why? Because just like it seems like every fucking X-Men movie does, it contradicts the previously established continuity of both the comic book series, the cartoon series, and the film franchise itself. Now see, this is when 20th Century Fox started to piss me off, because it's one thing to establish a film franchise. X-Men 1, X-Men 2. X-Men 3 started to contradict the continuity that was already established within the first 2 films. X-Men Origins Wolverine completely contradicted the fucking continuity previously established in the first 2 films, okay? This movie does the same. So that's why I say it's best to go into it as if it's a reboot, because I just found out, apparently 20th Century Fox intends for this to be the first in a new trilogy. And I'll tell you this, I would actually enjoy this trilogy a lot better than the original trilogy. That should give you some idea of my opinion of this movie. So like I said, going in there, ignoring all previously established continuity, ignoring everything I know about the X-Men franchise, let's get into this movie. With that said, this was actually a pretty damn good movie. Now, like I said, was skeptical about it because of my previous history with 20th Century Fox. And then when someone, I can't remember exactly which reviewer it was, but there was a review for X-Men First Class, a really good review that was put out like 2 weeks before the film came out. And I was hugely skeptical about that. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Homeboy said this was the best Marvel superhero comic book film adaptation ever made. The best. That means it's better than Spider-Man 1, Spider-Man 2, which Spider-Man 2 still has that mantle for me as being the best Marvel comic book film ever. Like, there hasn't been a film that can, well, from Marvel, not DC, because Dark Knight is probably the best comic book, well, superhero film adaptation ever. But as far as Marvel's concerned, Spider-Man 2 still has the title as far as I'm concerned. Homeboy said it's better than Spider-Man 1, better than Spider-Man 2, X1, X2 Blade? Are you serious? So I decided to check it out. And I could see why he would say that. So, like I said, just like in my previous movie reviews, what I'm going to do is I'm pretty much going to sum up what the movie's about, give y'all a brief synopsis of what it's about with no spoilers, and then towards the end of this review, I'll go ahead and I'll get into spoiler territory so I can talk about my favorite scenes and my least favorite scenes and whatnot. So let's dwell into X-Men First Class. Now, first thing that's worth noting, like I said, 20th Century Fox is the company, the studio that put out this film. This is not a Marvel studio film. So if you guys are wondering why this film does not tie into like Iron Man, Incredible Hulk, Thor, Captain America, the Avengers, that's because it's not a Marvel studio film. This is a 20th Century Fox film, and it's directed by Matthew Vaughn. Matthew Vaughn has made a name for himself in Hollywood because Matthew Vaughn, his director credits include Stardust and Kick-Ass. Now, granted, I wasn't a big fan of Kick-Ass, but that's just because of my personal taste. I'm not saying that Kick-Ass was necessarily a bad movie. I thought Kick-Ass was actually made pretty well. It just wasn't my cup of tea. But, so now he tackles the X-Men franchise. And like I said, this film was intended to be a prequel. It was, because it's supposed to tell the story of the founding of the first X-Men team. And it's supposed to introduce Charles Xavier and Eric Lancher, a.k.a. Professor X and Magneto, as young men, best friends, and we're supposed to see how their friendship fell apart and how they became arch enemies. And so pretty much the synopsis of this story is that this film, I believe, is set in, let's see, where does the film, okay, yes, the film takes place in 1962. It seems like we're in the middle of the Cold War, you know, the whole big thing with the US and the USSR and the whole, you know, the nuclear war scare, you know, that was back when everyone was worried about bombs being dropped on us and stuff like that. And it just so happens that at the same time is when this rapid mutation, this rapid evolution of the human race is taking part. And at this time, you know, mutants haven't been known yet. This is still a new thing. And so, you know, the film opens up with us being introduced to Eric Lancher, young man in a Nazi concentration camp, you know, during World War II, you know, the whole Jewish occupation thing with what the Nazis were doing and whatnot. And he gets introduced to this young man called Sebastian Shaw. And that was Eric's first experience with human, who we thought at the time was humankind who was trying to exploit and use mutants to their ends. Come to find out that Sebastian Shaw is actually a mutant himself. And pretty much what this does is an event takes place in the film that puts Eric on this trail of revenge. And his goal is to hunt down and kill Sebastian Shaw. Later on in the film, we get introduced to a young Charles Xavier, who's a professor of mutation and science and whatnot. And a young government agent comes to him needing his help. Pretty much the story is Sebastian Shaw, head of the Hellfire Clan, is aligning himself and his company with the USSR to start a nuclear war with the US. His plan is that the US and the USSR will get into a nuclear war where humankind will be wiped from the face of the planet. And by doing so, the new evolution, the mutants, will rise as the dominant species on Earth. Sounds familiar? Yes, it should. Because as we've seen in the previous films, this is essentially what Magneto wants. And so, you know, in what appears to be some type of in a rescue, Charles Xavier meets Eric Landshire, and they begin working together and whatnot, and they recruit this group of young teenagers, young individuals with unique abilities just like them, start grooming them to use their powers and whatnot. And all in all, it's pretty much a race against the clock to stop Sebastian Shaw and the Hellfire Club before they start World War III. So, with that said, not to give away anything else about the movie, what did I think about it? I thought the movie was good. Thought it was a really good film. Oh my God, the acting in this movie. Okay, I'm sorry, but when I found out that Michael Fassbender was cast to play a young Magneto, I knew he was gonna fucking steal this show, and he did. Michael Fassbender as Magneto stole the fucking show, okay? Spot on. I mean, really, really good performance. James McAvoy did a really good job as Professor X, surprisingly, because I didn't care for his character in Wanted. I didn't care for that film. I didn't care for his character in Wanted. I was afraid that they were actually going to make Charles that same type of character because he's supposed to be younger, you know? It was my perception that they wouldn't have him as, you know, the wise, intellectual, responsible, and mature being that we know Charles Xavier to be. I had a feeling that they were going to make him hokey and flamboyant and, you know, young man on the prowl type shit, which at the beginning of the film, they actually did kind of do, but that wasn't what he was about. And I'm glad that they decided not to do that. But yeah, the Kevin Bacon as Sebastian Shaw, Kevin fucking Bacon, people, that man can play a villain. He really can. I've always liked Kevin Bacon as an actor, and I've always liked his villain when the roles that he plays as a villain. You know, Hollow Man and Trapped. Oh man, those two films, he was fucking phenomenal as a villain. And this one I have to add to the list because him and Sebastian Shaw, good shit. Okay, so a few other things to make note of before I actually get into spoiler territory. Well, let's see. I really enjoyed the fact that the quote-unquote X-Men team, the first class, that they were actually supporting characters. I'm glad that they did not try and make them all key central characters in this film because this film really was about Charles and Eric. Those were the two main characters. So the kids, I'm glad that they had them as supporting characters, and I'm glad that they made them kids. That was one thing about the previous X-Men franchise that I didn't care for, was the fact that all of the main characters were adults. I'm sorry, but one thing about the X-Men comic books that made them so unique when they first came out in the late 60s and early 70s was the fact that there was a cast of young men and women that teenage audiences can pick up and relate to, teenage readers. That's what Marvel's whole fucking thing has been about. Why do you think all of their main superheroes are teenagers, young men and women? Most of them don't exceed the age of like 25. That's why. So I'm glad that, you know, it felt like this film went back to the quote-unquote roots in that aspect, you know? We didn't have fucking, you know, Cyclops walking around here. Yeah, I'm the big bad booty daddy. I'm the leader of the X-Men. Shit, you know, we didn't have characters who were already teachers. We didn't have characters who had full control of their powers. We didn't have, for fuck's sake, I love the Hugh Jackman and Rebecca Romijn cameos in this, but I'm actually glad to see an X-Men movie without Wolverine, despite the fact that he's my favorite X-Men character. I'm actually glad that we saw one without him. You know, he did have a cameo, just like Rebecca Romijn's Mystique character had a cameo, but, you know, they didn't steal the show. And I'm glad about that. I'm really glad. So I thought that you know, the casting was done well. Except two characters in particular I really didn't care for in this film. And I'm going to go ahead and save that until the spoiler portion of this review, because I really do need to talk about them, and that's going to be spoilers. So I'll go ahead and save that. But with that said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the non-spoiler part of this review by saying that X-Men First Class, a really good movie. I actually will put it above X-Men 1. It's not better than X2, but I will say it's better than the first X-Men. And the reason for that is because I found the acting to be better. I found the dialogue, for fuck's sake, the dialogue between Charles and Eric was so fucking good. And the story, you know, they said it, they actually said it in a historical time, you know, and all of the historical elements, all of the political issues that were in this film really did give the film a solid ground and a solid story, you know? I mean, this movie really was historical fiction because it took place during a very significant event in American and in world history. So just that saying, that gives it an edge up over the first film. So yes, out of 5 stars, I will go ahead and give this film, I'll go ahead and give it 4.5 stars out of 5. It was really good. I highly recommend it. Guys, check it out. Now, with that said, now we're about to enter the spoiler territory of this review. And with that, I'm going to go into discussing, like I said, the 2 characters I really didn't care for in this film. And I'm going to go ahead and discuss them right now. And those characters were Hank McCoy, a.k.a. Beast, and Raven Darkholme, a.k.a. Mystique. Those 2 characters really didn't care for in this film, and I'll tell you why. When I grew up, I knew Hank McCoy, Beast, to be a highly intellectual, highly charismatic, and extremely positive and extremely confident figure. And I understand that I'm talking about a grown and mature Beast. But this movie, Beast as a teenager, I fucking hated him. Why? Because he was nothing like what I just said. Yes, he was smart. But let me put it to you like this. He was smart, but he wasn't intelligent. Wait, let me see. Let me see if I'm making. I think that works. He was smart, but he wasn't intelligent. And the reason why I say he was smart and he wasn't intelligent was because he had all the book, he had all of the book knowledge, but when it came to everyday life, he didn't know shit about it. He didn't know, he was, like I said, teenagers, awkward phases, all these changes, mutation, all this shit, I've been there, okay? That phase of my life wasn't too long ago, but for fuck's sake, to say that that's what he was and to look at what he became, there was such a disconnect there. Such a disconnect that I just really didn't care for. That's not the Hank McCoy I grew up with. I don't know who that was, but that was not the Hank McCoy I grew up with. So I really didn't care for that character. And the same thing goes with Mystique's character, because she was she was just so, what's the term I'm looking for? She wasn't conceited. I would have liked her if she was conceited, but she was just very, just too conscientious. She cared way too much about her looks. That was the thing about her and Beast, that they tried to set up this little romance between the two, was because they were so fixated on their looks. And, you know, you had Eric the whole time telling her, it's like, why do you hide who you are? Why do you care so much what other people think about you, you know? And I understand that they did that to create that dynamic between the two characters so that you can understand what the connection was with those two. Because Eric, he knew who the fuck he was. He was Eric motherfucking Landshare, aka fucking Magneto. He was the big bad booty daddy, all right? He knew who the fuck he was, okay? You know, we're talking about the man who's going to become a level 5 fucking mutant in the future, okay? Just, I mean, it's cool. Just imagine that this is the man that's going to become fucking, you know, Ian Mckellen, okay? He was a cool fucking dude. He knew about himself, you know? It takes a badass dude to walk around with a fucking cape, all right? There's a reason why badasses wear capes. So, of course, they're going to use him in contrast with her so that they could create that dynamic so you could see why she fell in love with him the way he did, because he was accepting of her the way she was and whatnot. But I just really didn't care for her character. I thought I'm sorry. I like strong female characters. Mystique being one of them, but not in this film. Not in this film. I felt like they gave her the same fucking treatment that they gave Rogue in the original trilogy, which was bullshit. Because we all know Rogue is such a kick-ass fucking character. But they just confounded her with all these teenage issues. And I'm not saying that we can't have those teenage issues. You need them. Why? Because that's what allows viewers and readers to connect with them. But for fuck's sake, that shouldn't be what they're all about. You know, they should have something about their personality that transcends that shit, you know? But other than that, what else didn't I care for? I thought the female characters in this film, since I'm on the topic of female characters, I thought the female characters in this film weren't really given the limelight that they should have. You know, Emma Frost's character, you know, she was cool. She served her purpose, but she disappears halfway through the film. And, you know, Mystique doesn't really do anything of significance in this film. Neither does the secret agent that's working with them. I'm sorry, but the girls didn't really get any love in this film, in my opinion. And other than that, you know, y'all could say I'm nitpicking, but for fuck's sake, I did not like Beast's design in this fucking... I thought he looked ridiculous. I really thought he looked ridiculous in this film. He looked like a fucking cat. Didn't care for that shit at all. Just really unattractive. Unappealing. But with that said, one other problem that I had with the film, it's not a big issue. It's just something that just kind of got to me, was the fact that they did the whole Eric and Charles friendship, setup, establishment, and then breakup all in one film. I would have liked to see their relationship actually... I would have liked to see that relationship last longer than just one film. I mean, this film is like 2 hours, and in 2 hours, we get introduced to these characters. They're supposed to be friends, and then they have this big falling out at the end. I felt like that was rushed. I felt like they did, you know, that enough time. I don't think they really built on it. You know, certain things that we knew about these characters were not. It wasn't done in this film. For an example, like if you refer back to X-Men, the first film, you know, Charles told him they founded the school together. When Charles was talking to Wolverine, him and Magneto founded the school together. They built Cerebro together. They didn't do that shit in this film. The school was Charles's childhood home that he had inherited, and Cerebro was built by Beast. The helmet, Magneto didn't design that helmet. That helmet was designed for Sebastian Shaw so that to protect him from Charles. No, I didn't like that. I did like the somewhat passing of the helmet, if you will. I did like that, you know, that was Sebastian Shaw's helmet, and then Magneto took it and, you know, adopted it, and it became his. Even at the end of the film, we saw he went ahead and painted it. And I did like that, and I did like the design for the helmet. It was pretty kick-ass. But no, like these themes, these characters were supposed to do this themselves. Charles and Eric were supposed to found the school together. They were supposed to build Cerebro together. After the falling out, that's when he was supposed to use the helmet. I don't think we ever saw Charles take control over Magneto's mind. And I think that should have fucking happened in the film. That would have enticed him to use the helmet in the first place. Like, if Charles would have crossed that line, broke that barrier, and took control of Eric, that would have been, and Eric would have been like, hey man, don't do that shit no fucking more. Like, no, that's not fucking cool. That would have been the thing that was like, you know what? I can't trust this motherfucker. I need to get, I need to protect myself from him. That's the type of shit I would have liked to see. But like I said, I think this film should have focused more on their friendship and them building the university, the school, excuse me. Them building the school, them building Cerebro, them, creating this team and them fighting evil. That's what the first film should have been. They should have saved the breakup for the second film. And then, like, if they would have had the breakup, the whole tension between these two characters been the main point of the second film, and then finally the third film you wrap it up with the big showdown, between those two. By the third film they're arch fucking enemies. They're trying to kill each other. You see what I'm saying? Like, that would have been a nice little build up because we would have had the breadcrumbs. We would have had the trail. You see what I'm saying? Friends, breakup, arch enemies. That's how I think they should have done this trilogy. But who knows? I mean, I hope they do. I hope they do make a sequel to this. I'm actually looking forward to a sequel to this. Granted that they use the same, like, I want the same actors. I still want Michael Fassbender as Magneto. I still want James McAvoy as Charles. And I mean, other characters, man. Banshee was fucking awesome in this film. Like, Banshee was cool. Havoc was okay. I wasn't crazy about him, but the thing they did with Havoc, they made Havoc the kind of silent, strange, strong muscle of the team, but they didn't overdo it, which is what I loved, because too often they overdo that too much. And those characters, that type of character that Havoc is in this film, if they would have pushed that in our face and down our throats, he would have came across as, a douchebag and an asshole type character. Because they do that so fucking often. If you need to know what I'm talking about, look at Wolverine in the first two films. Look at Superboy in Young Justice. That type of character they're dicks. And they didn't do that with Havoc, though. They didn't. They really didn't. And I'm glad that they didn't. And, other than that, I think that wraps it up for this review. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I want to mention that I might be forgetting. Because, there were some other characters like Azazel, who I didn't even know who the fuck that was. Keep in mind, like I said, I read the X-Men comic books in the 90s and in the early 200s. Apparently, this motherfucker didn't show up in continuity until 2002. And all of a sudden, he's supposed to be Nightcrawler's father. I'm sorry. I don't accept you into my fucking continuity, okay? Like I said, I am an X-Men fan, but no. I refuse to accept him into my continuity, okay? Motherfucker, you're not even 10 years old yet, so no. But yeah, other than that, pretty good movie. Like I said, 4.5 out of 5 stars. Check it out. And that'll do it for me this week. Wow. I'm almost at 30 minutes. So yeah, let me go ahead and wrap this up. So yeah, guys, as always, comment, rate, subscribe. Check me out on Facebook, facebook.com/otakuassemble. Twitter, twitter.com/otakuassemble. As always, subscribe, youtube.com/otakuassemble. Blog TV/otakuassemble. Hit me up on Skype. And guys, stay tuned for my Problems with Hollywood rant. The rant segment is back. I'm going to go ahead and record that right after this. And Sunday, 8 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time, 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, live on Blog TV will be my Game of Thrones reaction vid, my live stream while I'm watching Game of Thrones, in which I will record and I will archive on the Blog TV website. And then later that night, I will upload on YouTube my review, in which I will link the Blog TV site in my review. But I'm not going to upload the actual reaction vid on YouTube. No, that's going to be on Blog TV. So with that said, thank you for joining me again this week. Oh, also, guys, give me feedback on how I did in this review. Let me know how I did, because like I said, with this and with my music review, I'm trying things out. This review was off the cuff, and so just let me know how I did. Let me know. Let me know. So that'll do it. And with that said, this is Larry Williams, OAW Commander in Chief. I'm signing off, and I'll catch you cats later. Peace.